So, hey everyone, welcome to episode 16 of Just a Chat With. I'm Andrew Dobby. If this is your first listen to Just a Chat With, we're a podcast where we talk about branding and creativity with the world's best in class. In the last episode, we sat down with Ben Radcliffe, who is a digital artist with decades of experience in the CG, feature animation, TV animation, and visual effects world, working on several amazing projects, including Shrek 2, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, Star Trek Into Darkness, The Martian, Jungle Book, Avengers, Transformers, and loads more. If you're a big CG 3D nerd like me, definitely go check that one out. Before that, we had Frankie Goodwin on the show, who's one of the creative directors at Saatchi & Saatchi. We've had Design Matters podcast host Debbie Millman on the show. She has some amazing chat on branding. We've also had world-renowned designer Michael Wolff and brand author Marty Neumeier, Noah Klokek from Pixar, and loads more. Today, though, I'm hugely excited as we're here with none other than David Martin, who is the president and founder at Fantasy Interactive, with offices in New York, San Francisco, Miami, and London. Fantasy is a human-centered product innovation team that ships premium products and ecosystems for some of the world's biggest brands. Since launching the company in 1999, David has worked with a suite of amazing brands, including Netflix, Xbox, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, MTV, Ford, Porsche, Huawei, Samsung, Tinder, and one of my favorites, Masterclass. Now, yeah, I love Masterclass. David now also works in a chief creative officer capacity directly with Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai, Tesla's CEO's Elon Musk, and Richard Yu, CEO of Huawei. David, thank you so much for being here. How are things going?
Andrew, thank you so much.
Yeah, so we met, for our listeners here, we actually met, I think, 2016 in your San Francisco office. I think I was about there, wasn't I? I was on a tour of San Francisco, and Fantasy was one of the studios that I got to visit. And, you know, it really stuck in my mind. It was a really great experience. And so, you know, we're delighted to have you on the show. And so thanks for giving us the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
How have things been for you over the last few months with all the changes that we've all been facing in the world?
Well, like for everyone, kind of insane, but you got to adapt, you know, and the people that can adapt quickly, I think, are the people that are going to get through this, you know, and roll with the punches. And those people that kind of let it just sag on them and literally go into a corner and whinge about this scenario, which is detrimental to a lot of people, a lot of businesses. But the right thing is to keep the head up, stay above water, and you know, we'll get through this, and we're getting through it.
Yeah, and so, like, how about your studios at the moment? Are they all kind of working from home? I know you're in your garage right now.
Right.
What's the kind of mix? I know you're across lots of different cities, so is it kind of the same all round where you are, or, you know, what's the situation?
Well, you know, here's the deal. When COVID kicked in, you know, for us and everyone in March, the majority of our clients at the time were automotive clients, right? And typically, you know, when something like this pandemic happens, the first thing that, you know, people are not going to buy is larger purchases like vehicles, right? So a lot of the work we're doing right now on products across different manufacturers kind of went into a standstill. And, you know, we got a little bit of, oh my God, you know, how bad is this going to be? Fortunately for us, that we have phenomenal long-term relationships and great relationships with key clients that we have, and that's pretty much has been our saving grace, that we were able to kind of come through this, and now we're growing, things are looking great. But definitely, like everyone else a couple of months ago, it was like, oh my God, is this going to come to an end for real? Is this how it's going to happen? But you know, I think everyone in this industry creatively, it's starting to really come back and at full throttle. So maybe not for everyone, but definitely for a lot of companies, and hopefully it will be that way for everyone as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. And just for our listeners' sake, we're recording this on the 10th of September, 2020. Just you know, just so you know, kind of timestamp of where we are. I think we found similar over here. David, that the kind of March, everyone had a panic, everything slowed down for a bit, and we found this month it's kind of been our busiest month yet, in terms of kind of new work coming in and kind of people kind of getting back, and I suppose it's that there's kind of two camps, isn't there? And you mentioned earlier that I think those that survive are the ones that adapt. I think we can't stand still, and your business has been very well set up. I know you tend to work with the best people no matter where they are. So I reckon this must have been quite an easy shift for you in terms of, everyone going home.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, just to be transparent, we have been successful really because we've already been remote for the past several years. I myself have been remote for God knows how long, years. I've worked out of an airplane hangar. Recently, a year ago, moved here to Arizona. So we've already been in this kind of, working remotely with people to try to get the best talent around the world. They're not all in San Francisco, and they're not all in New York, and they're pretty much not in America. The best talent, in my opinion, typically comes from outside America, especially on the creative and design side. And so in one way, it's kind of played well to us. In the past, clients would want to have, we want to work with the team in San Francisco, but we want to have all the designers and everyone that's in San Francisco there, even though you won't really be in the office that much with a client. It's just this mentality that, they've got to be there. And that's okay. But sometimes if you want to get the best type of people for the work, you've got to mix and match. And that typically is relying on the phenomenal talent around the world that typically doesn't get the opportunity to be part of some major products that, we get to work on. Yeah. And they may, they don't have the experience working in huge agencies or huge companies. So we tend to look for people that don't really have any experience, right, in these major companies, and they haven't done major products, but they've done their own concepts and their own work. And as long as they put that detail into that, that for us is gold for an opportunity. So that's why this remote culture for us plays right into our hands.
Yeah, and have you any tips? There's so many companies now going fully remote, or even ourselves in our own agency, we've gone to a kind of work from anywhere model, and again, in that hope that you can attract talent from wherever that lies. There's a lot of challenges that come around, like different time zones, and especially when it's a service-based business, and sometimes you need clients and workshops, and especially even trying to schedule our call today. You're in California, we're in Scotland, and it's kind of 10 to 6 at night here, and I think it's just before 10 o'clock in the morning for you. Is there any tips is there any kind of tips or hacks or things that have kind of worked well for you guys that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, well, look, being remote sounds great in so many ways, but it's not everything. A lot of our team members are dying to get back into the office, are dying to kind of get into those workshops and collaborate. And so right now, we're fully aware of some of the team members, have despair from that perspective. So what do we do? So it's all about kind of keeping in touch with your employees, ensuring that, there's a sense of, connection, listening, and ultimately that, if people during these times need a better way for them to work remotely, like what is it that we can do to support them, right? Because it's just not, one size fits all for everybody. But because we've had, have been doing this remote culture for years, our tips would typically be you bring in people that typically are very self-sustained, self-driving, they're not sitting there waiting for answers or twiddling their thumbs, right? So it's people that are like, they're ready to work, they're ready to make things happen. And those type of people typically work pretty well in any kind of remote, area, and they feel the trust from us at Fantasy that helps empower them to achieve what they need to achieve. So we're still figuring out. We don't have all the answers, as everyone is, but it's bringing people together when you can. So we'll do a lot of internal sessions where people, it's like they're in the same office and they're sharing their personal stuff, their dogs, their families, their kids, whatever. Like, we don't care if your kid runs by in their diaper or their underwear and tries to pull you. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
just part of
I
reality,
think that's a
right?
nice
And
thing,
it's
isn't it? That's the great thing about that. It's been about this is you see the family lives and you see the
you
real
do.
energy of people. Yeah, it's lovely.
So I actually did an interview yesterday with a guy that I worked with years ago, and you know, as I was talking to him about his experience and stuff like that, because it was kind of last minute. We jumped on a call, said let's just have a chat. We're on a Zoom call, and his two kids are jump up in the bed behind him, you know, and they're pretty much naked, and they're jumping up there and trying to pull out of him, Dad, and they don't realize Daddy's on the call. But you know how it is. There's all these stories out now with Zoom, and it's just one of those things where, you know, look, good people get things done no matter what the circumstances, right? So
Yeah.
it's, you know, and the trick is really for remote, it's finding those people.
Yeah, no, fantastic, fantastic. Now, you mentioned earlier, you know, you're in your garage just now, but you mentioned, you know, you used to work the airplane hangar. So now,
Right.
I love this about you is that not only have you created one of the world's most successful agencies, is that you're also a hugely successful pilot, and you know, for the listeners, you know, not heard of you before. You've got over 300,000 followers on Facebook. I think you're one of the most followed pilots. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I used to be the most followed pilot in the world. I kind of stopped doing that thing, you know, a bit more than a year or two ago. But anyway, yeah, I fly to work. And that was the key thing when we moved from New York. We were in New York. 2005 is when we moved from Sweden to, you know, after starting the company in '99 in Sweden. And for those that are listening, you know, where is this guy from Sweden? Where is he from? No, I'm from Ireland. I'm from Dublin. But we started in '99 in Sweden, moved in 2005 to New York. And in 2010, 2011, we moved to Napa Valley, just north of San Francisco.
Mhm.
And when we did that, you know, I didn't realize the commute that it would take to get down to the city. And I had kind of a romantic idea what that might be, which turned out to be a nightmare versus a dream. So I had to figure out, okay, how do I get to work, right? So we've got the office down the city. We work a lot with Google at the time, which was the key reason why I had to move there. And so I said, well, let's buy a jet ski and see, can I jet ski on because there was a river near the house. I could hop on the
Yeah.
jet ski and then literally jet ski down to Google and
Are
whatever I
you
had to
actually
go.
James Bond? Is that
You know, no, I wish I was James Bond, but you know, you got to be creative. And I'm just trying
yeah,
to think, you know,
yeah,
why not jet ski to work? This would be amazing. It's kind of
that would be
doable.
amazing.
The problem was when there was kind of big waves and it was super bumpy near the Golden Gate Bridge and stuff. I got soaking wet, and so it didn't really work out. And so I had to bring a change of clothes. It just was too complicated. So then I switched to, okay, what about if I fly? And so I don't know how to fly. I don't have a plane, so I bought a plane, and well, then I had to figure out how to fly after I bought the thing. So the thing, when I bought it, by the time it got manufactured, it was going to take 6 months, and
Yeah.
I knew I had 6 months to work this out.
And had you
And
tried
so
flying a plane before? Was this just
uh,
like a gut that I think I'm going to be good at this? I think I'm going to enjoy this.
to some extent, yeah. So you just got to throw yourself. Look, you got to adapt. Whatever it takes to get from point A to B, you've got to do it. And so anyway, I got the plane. It came, and Jesus, it was a big learning curve, right, to fly. And but once you get into it and really apply yourself, you can do it really well, right? So I ended up flying every day for work. So you know, just for context, if I was to drive from my house to, let's say, Google headquarters down in
Yeah.
Mountain View, it would take me over 3.5 hours one way in traffic. So what I did was I worked it down to like 46 minutes. And I left my house, took me 8 minutes to get to the airport, drove into the hangar, taxied out in the plane, took 14, 15 minutes to get down to Palo Alto, landed, had an Uber ready to pick me up to bring me into the front door of Google. So I had it under 46 minutes. So, you know, sometimes when a client would say, okay, listen, we got a meeting in an hour. I know you probably can't make it. You're up in, no, I got this.
I'm
I know.
here.
Boom, into the plane down, and they're like, this is amazing. So anyway, it's kind of a bit of a, you know, it sounds a bit crazy, but it was a true story, and I've been doing it for years and flying all over the country, which is in America pretty much the most amazing place to fly and learn to fly. So if anyone is ever interested in flying, let me know. I can give you all the tips and tricks. You
Yeah,
know,
and if people want to find your content, is Sir David Martin on Facebook? Is that right?
It's on Facebook, yeah, but don't, so old at
Don't
this
go back
stage,
there. I enjoyed it. I
I
watched.
just
I sat the other night and sat and watched a few videos. It's really entertaining.
oh,
I really enjoyed it.
the best one I ever did was I intercepted the eclipse. So I think it was like 2 years ago. The eclipse came from the west coast of America and went over to the east coast towards Texas,
Hmm.
and it was the most amazing aviation experience I think anyone can have. Like you're in the plane, you're up there at 17,000 feet. My other buddy who runs an agency in LA, who's also from Ireland, is in his plane, and we're kind of flying together. There's nobody up there on the coast of America, and we're flying into America from the Pacific, and we look back and we see this insane shadow moving at 2,000 miles an hour going
Wow.
right over us. So that whole experience is documented. And so if I'm going to call out one video, just search, my name and eclipse or something like that, and you'll
We'll
find
try
some.
and put it in the comments when we post this live. We'll find that video. We'll pop it in. So yeah, we'll go and search for that. So I suppose jumping back to the beginning of fantasy, back in 1999, how did it all come about?
Okay, I told this story probably a good few times. I think it keeps changing every time, a little bit every time I tell it. But long story short, I did, and this is totally true, everyone. I pretty much failed everything at school. I couldn't. I didn't have the attention span in math and English, history. I was just so bored. But when I got the geography in school, and I saw like the books that were much more had these beautiful little illustrations of how volcanoes work,
Mhm.
I was really interested. The problem for me was that I could never draw. Like when someone asked me to draw a dog today, I can barely make the four sticks of the legs. I'm the worst drawer, like the worst dancer, right? And so long story short, I had no career. So I kind of got kicked out of college, and I went to Sweden, where I had met my now wife, who's Swedish, and actually met her in Germany. And we went to Sweden for a couple of weeks to look for jobs. What are we going to do? We're 20 years old, and we have no career path. And she'd studied history and got some degree in history. I'm like, how is that going to work for us? And I had nothing. So we're sitting in her dad's garage, just like this.
Yeah.
And he had a computer with an internet connection and, with a little 56K modem. And I would sit there and I would download all these Jennifer Lopez, Britney Spears songs that I could find on Winamp. Do you remember Winamp?
Yeah, I
All
love
this
going
kind
up.
of stuff.
Yeah.
And, getting all this stuff, feeling like life is amazing. I've got this internet, looking at stuff at Area 51, the moon landing's been faked, all this stuff. It was awesome, right? But the problem was that when you surfed this internet, it looked like absolute shit, right?
I
And
remember.
my perception of what the internet was before I found it was that it was like, much more like the Minority Report, or interfaces in Star
Yeah.
Wars, right, where it just felt a lot more exciting. So, and I was always turned on by these beautiful interfaces that I saw in movies, and
Mm.
so I started this company called Fantasy Interfaces, right? And because to me, like a holographic interface is kind of like a fantasy interface. There was no term for it. So, but here's the thing: before I did that, when I was on the internet, we were looking for jobs, and we applied for over 40 jobs on cruise ships all over the world to clean toilets. And the goal was to get to America. And
Wow.
I grew up watching Baywatch, Knight Rider, all this kind of stuff, right? So
Yeah.
America to me was insane. And so, how do we get there? Okay, let's get on a cruise ship, clean toilets, and we'll somehow make it. That was the mindset at 20 years old. So,
Wow.
and no one was stopping us. So, but anyway, as I was looking for these jobs and applying for this stuff, which was a nightmare to do on the internet, I realized, oh my God, just maybe I could make this experience a little better. So I started designing little websites like funny pictures, Area 51, moon landing conspiracy photos, all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And if you search on Alta Vista or AOL.com and then Yahoo eventually, if you search funny pictures, my website was the number one thing that would come up. And I used to get such a kick watching the traffic coming, the counter going up. So that's ultimately the true story of how it started. And I just started designing websites, got into Flash,
Yeah.
early adopter in Flash, and Flash really made everything for us. We pretty much then went on to be probably the most premier builder of websites in Flash on the planet, which ultimately was the core of our business.
Yeah. And then there was other companies around that time, like Two Advanced Studios, weren't they? They were really
That's
well
right. Yeah.
known. Yeah.
Yeah. Great guys, too advanced, amazing. Eric Jordan, Shane Mikey, all those guys. And Eric, I think, lives now in New Zealand. And Shane works at SpaceX.
Yeah, that's one of the companies I remember following from a very young age and kind of
Yeah,
mimicking and kind of aspiring to be.
amazing. Do you remember Ultrashock?
Ultrashock.
Ultrashock, no, Flash Kid, all that kind of stuff. The guy from Ultrashock, Miko, he just reached out to me last week for the first. I've talked to him in nearly 20 years.
Oh
It's
wow.
it's insane, yeah.
So how old were you there, if you don't mind me asking, when you started fantasy back in
21, technically 21.
21? Wow. Yeah. So
Yeah,
so
it
it's been
doesn't 21 is a great age to start anything. 41 is a tougher age. I think, 20 is better. So when you guys are younger, you want to start something, now is the time. Believe me,
yeah.
the best things in life is learning, how to get up after you fail. And that will mold you into becoming, impenetrable. And that's what you need to get under your belt.
Yeah. So you've never really had a job working for anyone else. You've worked for yourself since then, really.
Technically, yes. I mean, I work for, every client that we have. So every time we work for a different client and I'm involved in those projects, I literally feel like I'm working for
Yeah,
someone
of
else,
course.
right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but, now technically I worked for Philips, like electronics, for 6 months before I moved to Sweden, and I got fired because I wanted to rearrange. I worked in their lighting department, in their sales department. It's the only job I could get. And when I was in Dublin, and they fired me because I wanted to change all the desks. They had these computers, right?
Yeah.
The way in Windows you could change the fonts and you could change the backgrounds and all. And they had the most ugly setup for all the computers. So one day I stayed after work and I went and I changed all everybody's stuff to better fonts, cool backgrounds, all this kind of that I thought was amazing. And so I came the next day and they were like, "No, you're gone."
Oh, you're out of here. You're out of here. Now I read somewhere that you were awarded being Sweden's most profitable business. Is that right? Is that true?
Yes, that is true. That okay. So that's technically true. Let me just tell you exactly what it is. It's called the Super Gazelle, and every year, every company in Sweden, all their information, all their financials are all public, right? That's how the
Yeah.
government in Sweden has it, right? And so the most profitable companies based on their previous years, that's how they judge it. So apparently, number two, I think, grew about 200 and something percent, and we had grown like 2,600, so 2,600% or something like that.
Hmm.
So we kind of flew by and won the thing, but we didn't enter. It was one of those things where we didn't even
Yeah.
know that we were in it. We didn't even know we won until the Financial Times, who host it, called us to say, "Hey, you've won this major award, the Super Gazelle." What is this? We didn't win some financial award. We have no idea how much money we even make. And so anyway, long story short, it turned out that we became Sweden's most financially successful company based on the previous year, and which is kind of crazy when you think about it. So, but it's nothing to hold the torch up about. Believe me, you don't want to be chasing
Yeah.
being the most financially successful
Yeah.
company in anything. That's a bigger conversation, but yeah.
Yeah. So now running a business for, I mean, how many years is that now? 20 years?
Something
There's
like
there's
that.
going to
Yeah.
be some major highs. There's going to be some major lows. Maybe
Yeah.
what are some of the biggest challenges? Any good stories that you can share with our listeners?
Oh, let's see here. Okay, so in terms of challenges, really, and stories, it really all depends on, what time of the era that we were in. But in the early days, getting our first client was a big deal. I mean, for the first 3 years, making a company, we made zero money. My wife was on social welfare, and we used her social welfare money to kind of survive, like literally survive, and as in, not from debt, but just trying to
Yeah.
buy food and have a regular life. And which wasn't much, but you put everything into work, so it didn't really matter. And so for 3 years, we tried to figure out, how do we make money. And after doing some pretty cool sites, winning site of the year with the FWA for Starbreeze in 2001, we eventually got contacted by a company called Roadrunner, which was owned by Time Warner Cable, which
Mm.
in the UK, it's like British Telecom, or
Okay. Yeah.
it's like AT&T here in the States. And they called us to say, look, can you, we need to make this amazing Flash portal. And, I remember, when we got on these calls, in the background, we had this internet cafe, and at the time trying to make any kind of money. And we had all the kids in the background, but we had the camera blurred. So when the client called us, the background was blurred, but it looked like that was the office. But it was full of kids coming from school, playing free internet and Counter-Strike. And so they had the perception where this is it, this is a real company. And so it was just at the time, I think 2 or 3 of us, and then had to hire more people. So that was a memorable moment, like how to kind of fake it till you make it, right? Today, memorable moments is maybe, when I met Elon Musk in a bathroom in LA, and we became, friends from there. And it was kind of very interesting, that my profession had got me into that bathroom queue, right? And so it's a long story, but that was an absolute highlight, and what came out from that, and kind of working and hearing Elon and chatting.
So how does that conversation start, though? In the bathroom, you spot that it's Elon Musk. Where do you pick up?
Technically, all right. So just to give everyone context, it wasn't like sitting in the urinals. I'm like, "What's up, Elon?" It was. We were there for UFC. So we were the agency for the UFC. So Ultimate Fighting, right? And long story short, Conor McGregor, this whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
We're coming back to that in a minute, because I'm a huge UFC fan. So I used to do mixed martial arts for years. So we need to come back to that in a minute.
Yeah, the Connor story. Okay, yeah, I'll go there in a bit. But okay, so long story short, so Elon, I'm there sitting with my buddy Josh, and we're at the front row I think the second row in LA watching some fight. I can't remember. And I see Elon come in, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, it's Elon Musk." He comes in, he sits over there at the front, kind of on the other side. So I was like, "Oh my God, that's kind of cool." I didn't know he would be here. And so I had to go to the bathroom eventually. And I went to the bathroom. Obviously, I don't know what's happened with Elon. I'm not looking at him all the time. But I go back to the VIP area, and I go, and there's a little corridor, and there's some security guy standing beside this little curtain. And you pull the curtain back, you go back, and it's another little corridor, and there's like 2 doors down there, right? And there's a little kind of enclave to the left. And I kind of go around, and I see a guy standing there queuing, just one guy, and tall guy, and it's like, "Oh fuck, Elon Musk, how are you doing?" And so we got. He goes, "Hey," and I said, I have a Tesla, I had a Model X, and he said, "How do you like it?" And I told him, "Look, I'm going to be super honest with you." And so we got into that conversation. Like, we had an honest conversation what I thought about the vehicle, what was amazing, what needed to be improved. And what struck me as he responded was that he maybe, he was maybe expecting someone to just, heap praise on him for what he's done, and which I did, of course. He absolutely deserves it. But I also was very honest and ambitious about how much further he can go.
Yeah.
So I told him, what I had to say, and he really resonated. And then we met afterwards again and changed contact info. And then he invited me down to meet in the headquarters of Tesla. And then I presented to some of the folks down there as well about ideas. He wanted me to come into Tesla and present where I believe mobility needs to go. What are the changes I feel that need to be made within the human interface platform, and the ecosystem, especially when eventually we come to autonomous stuff. Now, there's a lot of things I cannot say. This is pretty much the extent of what I can say at the moment here, because it's pretty sensitive. But getting to talk to a guy like that on a regular basis, emailing, whatever, it's, if you have a suggestion what I think Tesla should do, I tell him. And he can be pretty blunt in his replies sometimes, but he's typically really on it, and one of the most amazing people that I've met.
Yeah, well, it's a fantastic story. Thanks for sharing that with us. So I mean, you're surrounded literally by some of the most inspiring, leaders, companies, brands, and you work with them all. And your agency itself is seen that way in terms of loads of creatives. I know look to fantasy for for inspiration and for kind of leading the way. I suppose where do you look, David? Like, where do you've obviously had a clear vision in 1999. You loved interface design, Knight Rider, all that stuff is kind of, you've had that vision. You're now there, right? Do you feel? I suppose two questions. Do you feel like you've arrived and that you're at the top of the game, or do you feel, is there people that you look to that inspire you still?
I feel I don't feel that I've ever really arrived. I never feel successful. Does that make sense? And I think, why is that? And I've often actually asked myself, like, why people tell me. My dad just told me the other day, David, you have to understand what you've achieved. Because I think I called him because there was growing up in Ireland, right? We didn't really have a lot of money. We came from very, very standard background, and my parents were always an amazing guiding force for us and my siblings. And I remember my dad was always super, anytime he saw like a Mercedes, right? I could see his reaction in his face. He saw Mercedes as like the pinnacle of something, and always how he experienced something was always resonated with me. Like as a kid, seeing how my dad, he was excited about that. And so recently, I told my dad the news that we had been selected by Mercedes as their design partner, right? And I get to work with people like Gordon Wagner, who is, pretty much the iconic, car designer that turned pretty much Mercedes around when he came in to design his first S-Class in 2005, which coincidentally, the first car I ever bought was a 2007 Mercedes S-Class, which is what Gordon designed, his first major thing for Mercedes. And so, but when I told my dad about this, it was, the fact that I could tell him, hey, Mercedes chose us. And when, as a kid, he would always looked up to them. And now, as a son, I could tell him, now we are selected by Mercedes. So it's kind of an amazing moment.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where, your upbringing is always some kind of inspiration. Your upbringing is always something that sets your expectations of life. My expectations of life are probably, from talking to if you talk to my friends, they will often say they're a little higher than they should be. And I'm hard to please, and well, my wife will tell you that. And so long story short, how this world works, if you want to Google something, to me, it's just an absolute ball of frustration to find anything that you want online sometimes, right? And that, to be honest, that's just super frustrating. And that is the source of inspiration. For me, when I go, I don't go out there and look, okay, what's the best design going on here? Maybe for some little micro interactions, sure. But for ultimately trying to identify how should we do this? What needs to be done? It's typically going through an experience yourself, and you realize like, oh, geez, this is so unbelievably broken and bad. And it's 2020, and it's look, right now, I challenge anyone to go, let's say something breaks with your phone, and you got to Google it, right? Try and get the result in less than 20 minutes without feeling you want to punch your screen. It doesn't exist. So anyway, that's my source of inspiration is getting frustrated.
Brilliant. You said two words in amongst all that really resonated with me the first time I met you. And it's those two words, what if? And it was the one thing that really stood with me when I visited your studio in San Francisco. And that I love about when I follow fantasy on LinkedIn, on, all these platforms, is that, I often hear from creatives, oh, we don't get the best briefs or we don't get the best stuff. And I think you're a great example of showing how you go and get it. So I'm going to let you tell it because I think you'll tell it better than me. But could you tell everyone about your what if projects and what that has meant and done for your agency?
Oh, okay. So simply, what if is the question of, well, like, what if we did this better? That's as simple as that. So in our business, it's what if the airline website, for example, was like this. So for context, we have no sales team. We've never had a sales team, never new business team. So all the work that comes in to Fantasy for 20 years comes as like a word of mouth, right? And that's why we kind of also, we're small compared to other people think we're much bigger, because we don't just grow to make money. We just want to make the impact with the right ambitious partners. But typically, the problem was for us that we wanted to work with airline clients, and we weren't getting anyone knocking on our door. So we put out this video called "What If the Airline Website," whatever, and I'm sure you'll link to it in the description. But what happened was, when we put out that little 2-minute video of like a visual prototype that had motion, and I think there's a little voiceover we did. I think I wrote it on a weekend, and then quickly modified the stuff in Keynote, recorded it, and put this thing out, and it went viral in our design community.
Yeah.
But what's super interesting is that over 60 airlines called Fantasy within a 2-week period, and these airlines, all the major names, every airline you can think of that had a budget, right, called us and said, "Oh my God, we've seen this. We want to buy it." The first thing was, no, it's not for sale. It's completely fake. This is about an ambition. It's a vision. And so the most important thing you guys that are listening need to understand is when we put that out, and the 60 companies that called, right, only one company was actually thinking along those lines or doing something about it. And all those other companies, it was when they saw that video, triggered them to realize that we've got to take action. Because once you hold this pedestal up there, they now have something to aspire to. So that recipe for success is something that we then adopted. So we put out some more stuff that we wanted healthcare clients. So we put out something on healthcare. We did it on travel. That's how we did it on Tinder. That's how Tinder, Match, OkCupid, pretty much every dating platform came to Fantasy. It was the same then with auto. We put out something for auto, HMI. Then we got Ford, Mercedes, Tesla, Mitsubishi, GAC, et cetera, et cetera. So and this is the best advice you can probably get from this podcast that I will ever give will be to, and I don't mean to kind of veer to a different answer for a different question, but this is, for me, is important. Is a lot of people has applied to Fantasy over the past 20 years as designers from all different disciplines, and I think it's probably bold but fair to say I potentially have seen more design portfolios than anyone else on the planet over a 20-year period, because I was typically the one that vetted every applicant that came in. Just quick, takes me 30 seconds. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And the thing I would often see with every application is people didn't know what work to send. They didn't know how to present themselves. They were really worried about that, I haven't done this work, or I can't show this work. And what everyone needs to realize is that none of that's important. If you don't have the client, if you don't have the experience, it's irrelevant anymore. Like, we don't care. We don't care what degree. We don't care. What we care about most is that how, one, you present yourself, two, how you tell that story about your thinking, your process. But then if you don't have beautiful work for Ford or Tesla or Spotify to show, make it up. So if you want to redesign Spotify, there is nothing stopping you. And I can tell you at Spotify, there's so many designers there working on new designs all the time. And at Netflix, same thing. But typically, that one design that people go with typically comes from that one person in that team, right? And then it's modified by a larger team, right? So you have the advantage as someone that has no clients or has no big brands that you work with. You can pick any brand you want. And you've already got the infrastructure of Spotify. You know how it works. You know how a car interface in Tesla works, right? What are the things that you feel that can be improved? And then improve them. It's so easy to build on something that's already there versus starting from scratch. But that will give you a portfolio. It will be your own, what if Spotify did this, right? And it's people like that are working in Spotify, driving Spotify, that are going to see your work. I guarantee you, if you put out a great project, like, okay, what if LinkedIn did this, and you produced it and it looked great, and it doesn't put 2 weeks into it, but just put the details in, put the passion in, and tell the story as if, it's 50 people behind this, right? It's easy to fake it. And ultimately, I guarantee you the guy or girl that is driving LinkedIn design is going to see your stuff. And that is the most important thing that you need to think about, right? It's the what if and how it applies to you as a designer. We do it as a company. If we want to try and get those clients, just like you want to try and get a job, take anything you want and make it better, and you will be successful. Believe me,
That
because
is
we
the
have been.
best piece of advice, and it rings so true. I've interviewed, I've met so many creatives as well, and those who want to work and they don't have the type of work. If you put out into the world what you want to get back, it comes back at you. And your point that the person at LinkedIn will see it is so true. It's that people
Yeah.
forget behind all these brands, there's just human beings, and and they're searching their own stuff. It's someone
Oh
will pass
yeah.
it over. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
and,
no,
and believe me, the people on the brand side, you see these companies, I remember Nintendo, we worked with Nintendo, and for me, I grew up in Nintendo, and it was just the most iconic, amazing brand for me personally to ever work with. But when I saw the people on the other side, I'm sitting there and I'm sitting on a piece of concrete with a Wii Fit board before the Wii Fit was launched, and I'm
yeah.
trying to come up with a user interface for it. And I'm there in Nintendo with the group of people that work there. I can tell you that the bar is low out there, folks. It's low. So you can come in and achieve anything as long as you put your mind to it. And just all you got to do is look at what exists today, which pretty much out of 10 is probably not going to be better than a 5 or a 6. Just get it to a 7 or an 8. That's
Yeah.
all you got to do. And you don't have the politics, you don't have the red tape, you don't have the limit of time, you don't have the limit of business pulling at you. Just do it.
That's so good. It's so good, and I think to your point there as well. I think I've traveled a lot, and I'm sure you have as well, David. That when you get to places, it's just people in these places, and they're just like you and I, aren't they? It's just
Yeah.
you've just got to make yourself visible, and I think it's really important just now. And I think these are great tips because there's so many graduates, people coming out of university, and I was doing a talk this week with some students, and they're panicked at the moment. They're thinking, how am I going to get jobs? And I think that advice there is some of the best advice that
Well,
you can give
I've got
someone.
one more piece of advice. Stop making portfolios. Uh, uh, Stop making portfolio websites, because people like me, right, that sit in MTV, sit at Google, have to sit there and look at that portfolio, right? So what happens? We'll get 1,000 portfolios that we got to fly through in an hour, right? And so we get, let's say, 10,000 applicants a year, right? And I've got to fly through those, and other people do it, but I love going through them real quick. And typically I will look at one, and within 3 to 5 seconds, I will already know yes or no. Okay, I will know. Sorry, I will not know yes. I will know no in three
Yeah.
to 5 seconds, which the majority are that way. Because when you come to a portfolio, typically your portfolios are, has your good work are somewhere in the portfolio, but the way you kind of present it, the UX around it, it's all a mess. And then I got to go to 1,000 different versions of the same portfolio and find the work. And then you put up these screenshots, and then I don't know who really did the work. I kind of know you kind of say you did it, but I know there's definitely other people that were part of that work. So the best thing you can do is when a client asks us, okay, Fantasy, what kind of work do you do in this sector? We don't send them a portfolio, right? So what we'll do is we'll make a keynote deck, or a keynote deck, and because it's a slide format, right? And you can't go crazy in UX with crazy ideas in navigation. It's just give me your story of who you are, your philosophies, your process. Show me your work. Show me what was it, what you really did, and how you present yourself. Right, so is key. So my advice is this: as you make a keynote, you put your work in it, whatever way you want. All right, but then you do a recording. So you record your screen and you record your voice. So we're listening to you just like you're listening to me right now, and you're saying, okay, so here's Tesla or Mercedes, whatever. And when I was hired by X company and they brought me in to do X, Y, and I produced like, just talk people through their work and send people a quick 2 to 5 minute video of your keynote deck. Because ultimately at Fantasy, we want you to be able to do the exact same thing with a client. So let's pretend you're building the next brand new drone for Bell called Nexus, right? Which is this amazing new drone platform that will be coming to the market in a couple of years to transport you around rather than a vehicle like a car. But let's say you've got to present to that client, right? The last thing they want to do is get a couple of JPEGs sent over to them or some random stuff. They want to see you and hear your passion about that work or those ideas. So it's so important that you connect with people visually because you're creating visual work. So let's say in the background here, for example, I'm not on Zoom right now, but if there was I could put videos right behind me of all the work I'm talking about, right? And that is so important to inject you as the designer into your work and tell that story. Don't put it in some rambly long words and just stop building portfolios.
I love it. I think you've just invented a new platform of some sort as well, where it's only linear and it's got this voiceover over the top as well. But I think you're so true, David. I think really wise words for anyone listening. I think
Right.
David talks from huge experience, and it all rings true to me as well. Now, David, something we always ask. We're big lovers of brand. Big theme that obviously runs through these episodes, and I'm just wondering if you could sort of define brand and talk about it in your own way. How would you put it into words?
Okay, so I watched the other night one of my favorite movies of all time, Wedding Crashers, and there's a quote in that movie that says, "What is true love?" And they say true love is the soul's recognition of its counterpoint in another. So a brand, I guess, is the soul of your ambition that is ultimately recognized by others. Right? Kind of a corny way to tell you what I think about brand, but anyway, a brand is ultimately, what your energy, your passion that you put into something, and then how people recognize that brand, which is ultimately recognizing you and those efforts. So it's what you make. It's often perception. There's a lot of companies that we work with, which are major names. I remember going into MTV, doing MTV.com years ago, and that was like, oh my God, we're at MTV. And you walk in there, and you're like, this is not kind of what I expected, right? So again, it's that perception, of what a brand is. It's what you make it, and that's why all of you have the absolute advantage because no one knows really your weaknesses, and they kind of don't really know your strengths. But when you put that energy into that brand, right? It's whatever you want it to be, and it's just positivity that should come out of that. And it's you have the complete ability to do whatever you want to do. And so don't ever doubt yourself that you cannot be on the level of these top folks in these top companies, because believe me, when you get up there and you see at the top, the first thing you'll realize is, wow, the bottom is right here. It's not that far down. So to get to the top, it's really just a tiny bit up there, and it's just effort. It's passion.
Love it, love it, love it. So, David, you're clearly a very visionary person, and able to see a kind of head of time. And I'm just wondering what you think. What does the future hold for fantasy? What does it hold for UX, UI design, and kind of where are we headed?
Okay. That is a tough question to answer. Where are we going? I think we're going to places that are typically going to be less frustrating for users. We're finally seeing, for example, in automobiles, where people are looking to buy, a sports car or an SUV, and they no longer look just on the outside. Now they're looking on the inside first, right? And if they look at a beautiful, let's say $300,000 supercar, and just, oh my God, I'd love to have that. But then they stick their head in the inside and they realize, oh my God, that's such a dated experience. They do not go ahead with that purchase, right? So we're seeing this from all the data from lots of different OEMs. And so what we see is that user experience, UI, now has a real seat at the table. And I think the major change, it's not, I can't predict the design trend right now or UX trend. It's not about that. It's more what I can see is that there's companies out there hiring people at the very C-level tier of the organization that are now responsible for human experience. Where before there was no seat at the table. There was no seat at the board. Today, we get to work and present to the board and to CEOs of major establishments that there's no way on the planet 10 years ago we would have got near people at that level. But it's becoming such a key part of a company's vision. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, years ago, do you remember Anderson Consulting, who are now Accenture, right? And some of the big companies, if they needed to know what to do, and we're a bank, should we go crypto? Should we do that? How do we handle mobility? And typically, they would reach out to, in the old days, to like Anderson Consulting and Accenture. Today, it's tiny companies, with designers like you guys and girls that are in them, like Fantasy, that ultimately help and is the first call for some major companies and brands to figure out, well, what is the future for this? How do we pivot? What are the features? What is the future of cities? What is the future of transportation? And sometimes you get that question from some companies and you're like, wow, I'm kind of surprised they don't know themselves. But then when you get in there, you realize it's a team effort. Working so closely with those partners is essential for them and for us to ultimately find out where we are going. And so that's what I think the major changes in the space. We have now a seat at the table, where before we were just web designers.
Yeah, no, I love it, and you've carved that space as well. You've pioneered it. You've made that seat at the table. I think is the key part there as well. It's not happening by chance. So as I said earlier, a lot of our listeners are just getting started with their careers. This is they've just come out. They're during COVID, they're panicking, maybe struggling, they're figuring out. Is there one thing that if you've given lots of great tips actually in terms of portfolios, but is there anything that just if you were to go back and you could kind of tap young David on the shoulder and give him a little tip, is there anything that you could give to those listeners right now?
Okay. Going back to the very beginning, where would I go? I think probably don't work with big egos. Big egos is training. Designers typically, naturally can come with an ego. Creative people, right? And there's definitely nothing wrong with that, but as long as it's controlled. So just surround yourself with good people. You don't have to go out there and work with the absolute best designer out there. You've got to work with the best person, right? Because the best people will always have your back. They will always be pushing, and they will, ultimately look at you to mentor them. And when you can point them in the right direction, they will get there. So I think it's surrounding people around you, or putting people around you that have your back, versus they're just extremely talented at something, right? So that is a lesson that we've learned a few times at Fantasy. Again, this is over 20 years, right? I'd say the other thing that I would focus on more is life, in terms of less work, more life. And when you have to put your heart and soul into a company, and you're not an employee, everything becomes your day to day, your sleep, your dreams. It all becomes focused on work. And I guess I was 21, so I kind of grew up focusing on the company, and I didn't really have any friendships or social circles, right? So I didn't really have friends really until I was, in my, I'm 43 and I just turned 43 last week. So I didn't really have friends till later in life. And then when I moved here a year ago to Scottsdale, to Paradise Valley in Arizona, there's a lot of people here that are very successful at what they do, and doctors and this and that, and tech people that are kind of similar age, right? And I think that the joint thing that when we have a few beers, joint thing that we all come up with was I wish, we could have had less time on work and more time focusing on life. So it's kind of that balance, right? And say those that have their own companies, as like you, Andrew, you probably are well aware of this, that you give it absolutely everything, and that's great for a certain period of time, but you've got to be able to give it everything at life, especially when you have kids. That's kind of when you will kind of know that more than any other time.
Yeah, I think that's
So we had kids late.
That's a great point, and I constantly talk to our team. We talk about this as life as well as work. Let's make sure you've got the balance right, and we've got both. And I think the world's opening up to that now, and it's nice to see that it's becoming more of a focus on kind of mental health in the workplace and kind of kind of work life balance, and not trying to kind of to see people as human beings. I think that's a really
And you know what's crazy, right? So imagine, we're you and I, Andrew, we're out there in space in a little spaceship, and we find this planet Earth, and we're having a look at Earth. And go, oh God, Earth looks nice blue oceans, nice mountains. You got all these humans down there, and but wait a second, something's wrong here. And you're like, what you say, Andrew, you say to me, David, what's wrong? And I'm like, but Andrew, look, they go to work. They've 7 days in their week. 5 of those days they're giving something, and they get 2 days back, right? So the concept is, like you go to the store, you give someone $5 and you get $2 back. It just doesn't make sense. So I think one major shift that's going to happen in the future could be, with all these movements going on, you never know, it could be next year. But I think one major thing that's going to happen is that the work lifestyle, the work week, eventually will migrate to, long term. It will be you will work less than you will have time off. Right now, obviously, we're on a 5-2 ratio, right? And I feel eventually, you'll have a Friday or a Monday off, so it'll be a 4-day work week. Eventually, will become 3-day. This will all change as different metrics and economies can support that. But just think about it. If we were Earth trying to sell an alien race, oh, you come to Earth. It's only a 5-day work week. You get 2 days off. No way! I'm not taking that deal.
I'm not going there. You need to write that blog post now. You need to do a what if it was a 2-day working week, 4 days, 5 days off.
My CEO for those is going to kill me.
Oh, I love it. And again, I could talk all night, but I'm conscious of time. So I just want to thank you very much, David. There was so many great truths, so much value for our listeners in that, and thank you for taking the time out and chatting with us today. If you've enjoyed the podcast and you want to support, just please rate us, write us a review. And if you want to check out Fantasy, you can find them at fantasy.co. That's still correct, David, isn't it?
Yes, not .com. $7 million for that URL. We couldn't afford it.
.co. You can find Fantasy also on LinkedIn, Instagram, anywhere else, Facebook?
Wherever, the internet.
Where all the places, everywhere. Yeah. So we publish a new episode on the last Monday of every month, almost. So this will be out on one Monday coming soon. You're obviously listening to it. So make sure and have all the notifications on if you want to get our next ones. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much, David.
Thanks, guys. Amazing talking to you.
Thank you so much.